there is so much more that you can do by carefully weighting your fly. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Various ways in which you weight the fly and what that does for the fly in the water, how it affects its behavior, and how you can achieve certain kinds of actions that you want from the flies. We'll also use the weight to help with the profile. So we'll also work on the shape. What are the three key words of fly fishing, right? Observation, interpretation, presentation. And of fly tying, it is size, shape, color, and action. So we're going to see how using the weight will have impact on the size, shape, color. Well, not color, but the action at least. Okay? So there we are. That is just a sample thing in there. Right? So let's start off by talking about the various materials and whatnot that are used for weighting. Here's one way to weight your fly. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what you're doing when you put a cone or a bead on the front of a fly. You're turning into a jig. Right? Now, I'm old enough to remember when jigs were called jig flies. Anyway, lead wire. Lead wire comes in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sizes. You can get a nice handy package like this, has all the different sizes in it ready to go. Or you can just buy the little spools, that works fine. We're going to talk about how to use lead wire in various ways on the shank of your hook. There are beads. I have a collection of different types and colors. These are glass beads. If you're going to buy glass beads, or I think they're plastic, frankly, you'll notice some are a little bit shinier than the others. The ones that are shiny have a silver lining in the hole. They're sometimes referred to as rocaille beads, and these will show up nicer in the water than just the plain ones. The inevitable, of course, cone heads. They also come in various sizes, shapes, and colors. We have, oh yes, these have been popular in the last few years. You may remember they started off as bead chain. And then over time, they started to develop all kinds. I've got, I don't know, half a dozen different types in here. The common wisdom says that you wrap this in lead wire approximately the same diameter as the diameter of the fly, of the hook, right? Something like that for this. But if you look at a hook, I should have put a larger one in for this. If you look at a hook, and just find the midpoint. That's about the middle of the hook right there. Which end is heavier? The back end, obviously. There's a whole lot more material, metal back there. So by definition, if you did nothing to this hook, you would expect it to sink, bend first. Okay? It doesn't always work that way. What happens when you put a bead on here? It now starts going down eye first, right? So the way weighting has evolved with the prevalence of so many relatively easy to get beads and cone head, people just put them on. All they want to do is get it down as close to the bottom as they can and just bounce it around. I can remember catching an awful lot of fish by carefully weighting my fly so that when it sank on a level keel. And in fact, you didn't want to overweight it. You wanted it to sink slowly, and you were instructed to watch your leader, because when your leader takes off, something is taken. You don't feel anything. You have to watch it and see it go. Right? Caught one of the biggest sunfish of my life. Huge thing, right? So the wisdom is to simply tie this thing on scissors. Right? Well, how about doing it this way? Let's do something that will allow us to weight the hook and change the profile, but not overweight the hook. We don't want this thing to be too heavy. We want it to sink slowly and on a level keel. So what you might do So this is lead wire. It's about 15 thou, I think. What you might do is tie it in on the side. All right? down on the side. Make sure it's on there good, secure front like that. And over the top, tie it down the other side. Now what you've done is you've helped to build a taper into the fly and added weight very carefully to it. So just pinch off. Now, you see that? You basically tripled the width of the hook. When you make the body on there now, you're going to get a naturally dorsally compressed fly pattern out of that. You get the idea? Very simple, right? To finish tying it in, all you want to do is just build up a little V in the back here of thread, and that's just to take the taper, the hard step out, and just soften it out a little bit. There you go. Now, if you want that to be that much more secure, nothing wrong with putting a little bit of head cement right on there now, and that will help it stay and put when you start dressing the fly. This is what I like to do. I start with the bare hook. I just hold my lead so that it's just slightly above the hook shank, pinch it there, and I wind forward. Push it back a little bit, and I like to put, if I'm going to weight the whole fly like this, I've got 20 wraps on here. Okay, and this is a size, I don't know, it's a nymph hook. The idea is to try and get this down the center of the hook shank. Now, I know and you know that's not going to stay there. So how do I, in order to set it in place, I create what I like to call bookends. Essentially, it's just a little bit of thread on each end that eventually I will taper, come to the front, and build up into a taper. All right? This is basic and simple and straightforward. Now, how is that going to sink in the water? On a level keel, right? So as it sinks in the water, the fish are going to get a good full side-on profile look at this. Okay. Will it change the shape of the body? A little bit. Suppose we want a wider profile. To do that, take the same wire, put a second layer on. Position it where you want the shoulders to be, we'll call it that, right? Oops. Okay, get the idea? And then what do you do with that? Well, guess what? You do exactly the same thing you did to the other one. You just build that up. And this is really good for if you're tying flies, what's referred to as in the round. Meaning that the fly is going to look the same from any angle. Generally time or hackle all the way around so that this fly in the water is you get the same view of it regardless. Right? So you don't worry about what color the top is versus the bottom. Get the idea? And again, put some head cement on it. If you want to take the time, you can use, knot scents or any of those UV curing things, and use that as well. This will just help the material when you put it on there. It'll have some tackiness to it. It'll help it to stick and make a neater fly for you in the long run. Again, very straightforward and simple. Doesn't have to be complicated. How many of you know what a balance nymph is? A balance nymph? It's another way of weighting your fly. What's his name out west?
Rowley. Phil.
Phil Rowley, yeah. Phil Rowley, that's right, yeah. He's been an advocate of these balance nymphs for quite some time now. And you tie them, lo and behold, on a jig hook. Okay? People go to all kinds of crazy lengths. So let's take a look at some options for putting the weight on this. The idea here is that you're going to put the weight in front of the eye, so that when you tie on in the middle, the fly will be balanced and sit in the water that way. All right? Use a pin like this, for instance. Suppose you want to add a little color to it. I went out and bought all kinds of these needles here. And you do this differently than you do with when you put this thing on your hook. You actually want the large hole forward. See what happens? You see that? Let me tie it on there for you. You need to trim these things to the right length. That's always a good idea. And you cannot overdo this part. You really need to work on this, because if you think about it, everything that you're putting on here is metal, slick and slippery. You want to make sure when you're tying it down, it's nice and firm. Now, by putting the small hole towards the hook instead of the large one, which is what we do when we're normally doing this sort of stuff, it sits under there a lot better. If you've got the big hole, the bead has a way of sort of sliding under. This will help take some of that out.
Are those dressmakers pins or something, Sheldon?
Yep. They come in boxes like this, all different colors. And again, you would, when you're finished with this, you would very definitely glue it. This is sort of like setting it up for now. Now you're going to start tying the fly, basically. You can do these up in advance, a dozen or 2 dozen or whatever it is that you plan to do. And that is how it sort of sits in the water, you see? Get the idea? This one's got a pink head. So you tie your favorite woolly bugger on the back of there, or a mayfly nymph, or a little streamer pattern, a little pinhead type or minnow type pattern. All of that works very nicely, and it sits in the water this way. So when you cast it into the water, it goes this way. It sinks more or less this way, and I think it just gives it a good strong profile, which encourages the fish to take it. And some of the other, and if you don't balance it, ergo the name. As David pointed out, there is even these metal ones, these brass ones, the tungsten ones are much heavier. And they come at a bit of a price. So what you do to imitate the tungsten ones is you take a little bit of wire, lead wire, follow the same thing I did before, see? Just wrap it. And you've got 12 or 15 or 20 wraps on, whatever you want. Pinch it off nice and even. Now, I've put this bead on what they would say is the right way. The small hole to the front, and the large hole to the back. So you want to have wire that fits into that hole when you wrap it on there, so that it maximizes the amount of weight you're getting out of front, because after all, you are trying to turn this into a jig, right? So you might as well be able to do that. And again, build your book end up on the here, like this. And you end up with a much heavier fly, very little extra bulk though. All right? Get the idea? Straightforward? Okay, you guys are too easy. You guys know everything already. I don't know why I'm bothering. I should have remembered this crowd, right? Okay. What's next?